Great.
All right, so that we're recording this session. And then once you're done, then we can turn things over to Heather.
Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, so everybody on the call from the hospitals, we have members from the BID Plymouth, the BID Milton, and the BID Needham teams. I want you to know this is a Meditech vendor-led session. Those of you who are attending from the hospital will be listening to people who work for the vendor Meditech, not our analysts in the departments that work with UNIS. So just to be clear, this is a Meditech-led meeting today. They will go through the screens and the high-level information on how the charge capture works. What we'll do is we will have follow-up meetings internally at each facility, but right now this is for a high level, who's responsible for charges within the ancillary department, clinical areas, materials management, whatnot. So we will go through all the areas and talk about charge capture in general, fixing rejections, things like that. Keep in mind, this is a high level Meditech run seminar, and we will follow up with you after this call. This is being recorded. So what I have is a list of people who could not attend, whoever declined the meeting, and I will have a second session so that those folks who have missed this session will be able to view the recorded session. So stay tuned for that. I'll be sending out a second session as well as follow-up session. Without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Heather Wooding, who is one of our, is an analyst from Meditech, and she will kick us off on the agenda. Thanks, Heather.
Hi there. My name is Heather Wooding. I'm a senior analyst in the Meditech Revenue Cycle Group. And the Revenue Cycle Group leads the Charge Capture webinar. And we have folks from most of the clinical applications. And I'll just start off by reviewing the agenda. The purpose of the call is to ensure that everybody who is in a charge generating department is aware of what they do in their application that will generate charges to be sent to billing, and to ensure that you can know what happens in your application, know how to review your review your charges on your accounts and billing, manage any charge rejections that occur, as well as manage your view and report on in the patient accounting application. You can see we have some of those routines. We also at Meditech feel very, very strongly that each hospital or each of our customers needs to ensure that they have a charge reconciliation process. Where the position that we certainly do not want to be in is, 3 weeks, a month after you've gone live, to say, oh my goodness, the charges from insert application here aren't coming over, they're not coming over correctly, they're not coming over with the correct prices. Those are all scenarios that we want to make sure that we are not in a post-live environment, so that we want you to ensure that this reconciliation process is established before you go live as part of your integrated and parallel testing, so that we will not be in those bad situations post-live. Okay. We do have linked in this agenda, which you should all have, we do have recommendations on establishing a charge reconciliation team and process. You guys can review those. Okay. After I talk, I'll be turning it over to Imaging and Therapeutic Services to review their routines. Then we'll go to lab, then we'll go to pharmacy, surgery, materials, PCS and EDM. Okay. And then we'll wrap up and have any questions at the end. Okay. This is allotted for 2 hours. I have, in my experience, we do take the full 2 hours to hit every application. So without further ado, I will go ahead and start. Okay. I did also receive some specific examples from the BID Info Systems Department that they wanted to make sure I hit. So I'll actually go ahead and do my demonstration portion in your test system. Okay. Okay. I am attached to your test system. I'm actually signed on to the Milton business unit. Okay. We want to start off with the batch desktop. When charges are generated in clinical applications, those are sent by a background job to the patient accounting application, and they are handled from there first onto the batch desktop. So we can see, well, we don't have any charges for today. We can see this is showing just today's charges, but if I use my calendar navigator to go back to previous days, we can see yesterday charges from lab and registration came over. When I expand these, I can see, you know, the dollar amount for each one of those charge batches. Okay. This batch desktop is access driven. So you should only be able, on this desktop, should only be able to see the journals that you have access to. That is determined in the journal dictionary. Okay. When I have a particular batch highlighted, I can either view that batch. This is a sort enabled display, so I can sort these by the different columns. If I'm looking for a particular charge in here, okay. I can also, right from here, I have this account highlighted. I can use my view account footer. It'll actually go on to that patient's account, and I can dig into that patient's account further if I needed to look at other information about that patient. Okay. There is also a printable format. Okay. Under the list option, I'm going here, the list, okay. And we can see that either in summary, transaction level, or extended format. Extended format obviously has the most information on it. I'll show that one for now. Okay. So we can see in here the patient information and any additional information that would be passed over with a charge. For example, if it's a drug, we might have NDC information. If it is therapy, we should have therapy G-code information. Some lab charges, we might have some hemoglobin and hematocrit levels. That type of information can all be passed from the clinical and ancillary applications into billing, and then we can see them on the accounts here. Okay. And then also on this report. On any given day, charges may also be rejected. Okay. So we receive these charges from lab and registration. Registration has the room charges in it. We can also see on any given day charges that have been, we have a little summary screen when I hit this charge rejections, showing me, you know, how many charges were accepted and how many were rejected on a given day. Okay. This particular display is date specific. I can also change the date range in here so we can see a range of dates. This top screen is only for the dates that are being displayed here. Any charges that are still unresolved are displayed in here, and then we can highlight that particular area and access the process rejections routine in there. Okay. Now, this particular one shows all unresolved rejections across the entire business unit. So there would be 3, one for Plymouth, one for Milton, and one for Needham, based on the business unit that you're signing on to. It is also possible in our journal dictionary to have particular rejections assigned to particular people. Okay. So if I go to your journal dictionary, whoops. Go to view. All right. Okay. So here in the lab journal, we can see for rejections, who are they assigned to? And again, that's per each business unit. You can see right now, based on our standard content, Meditech is still the assigned user. Okay. So that is, so we like you very much, but we're not going to work your charge rejection. So that's something that will have to go on your to-do list to ensure that those are assigned. Okay. You can also, I'm in the view screen, but in the enter edit screen, you can also use particular department codes and have those assigned to particular users. We find that particularly helpful with imaging and therapeutic services because multiple departments are feeding charges into that one, out of that one application into that one journal. So you can say, well, the CAT scans go to one person and the x-rays go to another person and the physical therapies go to another person. Okay. And that is linked by the general ledger department, which would be defined in here, to a specific user here. Okay. When those rejections are assigned to you, you will actually be able to see them on the patient accounting desktop. In your My Work List section, there is a charge rejection, should be a charge rejection option. Am I missing it? It's not on My Work Lists. Okay. Not on My Work List because Meditech's not supposed to work them. So there will be an option. That screen, however, will look very similar to the screen that I'm going to show you now, with the process rejections option, where we can see all of the rejections that are assigned to you or assigned to whoever is working them. And then we have this process screen here. Okay. I'm going to go ahead. Now, I was supplied with some specific rejections that you guys wanted me to review, and I do have them. Okay. Go back to the summary. Okay. Now, we certainly know that all three of the facilities have been working together to, sort of have a single charge master. Obviously, that does provide you with plenty of challenges in terms of making sure that all your pointers in your clinical applications have the correct billing code. Okay? If a charge has been sent to billing and it's missing a billing code, okay, we have an example here. So you've entered a new drug into the drug dictionary in pharmacy, didn't get a chance to get a billing code for it. Okay, what will happen is you'll end up with a rejection for a missing charge code. Or if when you typed it in, you typed in the billing code, but you transposed some numbers, you may see a similar rejection for invalid charge code. Okay? All of the charges here, they show you all of the reasons why they rejected. Okay? So this particular account has a missing charge code. You're the pharmacy director, you're like, oh, yep, we just got that put in, we got it put in after. We can go to our process screen and then we can input the correct charge code in here. Got our, what is it, 1 gram? A 1 gram vial. Excellent. Okay. And now this charge can be fixed. I can go ahead and post this error. Oops. Now, this is another issue. It is a pharmacy charge. Pharmacy charges are typically set up as charge editable. So you would have to put in the dollar amount. Okay. It was originally sent as $5.20. We can go ahead and add that in. Okay. Now I should be able to post that transaction and okay, that should go. Should go back to my. Okay. And it did not work. That didn't work. Should have worked. Oh, it says posted. All right. Oh, yes, it is posted. I'm sorry. So that transaction has now been posted to the patient's account. I would then be able to review that patient's account and see the charge transaction on it. Then when I look at the patient's account transaction summary, can see that charge right there. And I can see rather than coming over in the regular charge pharmacy batch, it is in the fixed rejected charges batch, indicating how it ended up on the account rather than through the regular charges batch. Probably the most common rejection reason in a live environment is charges that have invalid dates of service. Okay? You know, your missing charge codes and your invalid charge codes, they usually shake out pretty quickly, but on an ongoing basis, the most common thing is invalid dates of service. In that journal dictionary, when charges are coming from clinical applications, we set a parameter allowing charges for service dates before or after the discharge date. This is to prevent us from having charges on accounts that aren't the right account. So if a patient was at your hospital from the 4th to the 5th, if they have a charge from the 1st or they have a charge from the 8th, again, with the dates of service, then we are making an assumption there that that charge was probably posted to the wrong account. And if it was posted to the correct account, then when the charge was entered in the source application, that the service date was misentered. Okay, so these charges for service dates, and our best practice recommendation is, depending on whether or not you do pre-admit testing, sometimes up to 3 days prior to the registration date, and then 0 days after the discharge date. Now, I don't know exactly what your settings are or your practices are for pre-admit testing, so we won't dig into that right at the moment. Okay. When that does happen, you can see here from these lab charges, and I process those charges, okay, I can look and see. So these transactions had a transaction service date of 8/23. I can show those here, but when I'm looking at the patient, they weren't registered until 8/30. That information shows here. Okay, so my practice would then be to look to see, does this patient, you know, by medical record number, have another account where they were on 8/23, or to verify, yes, this was pre-admit testing, and this is an error I can override. We may also, in the case of a double registration, the patient got registered once, and then they mistakenly got registered again. We may, in patient accounting, do a process called freeze charge entry. Okay. And we can see that on our accounts. Let me pull up an account. So we can see right here on this particular account that this charge entry is frozen. When we do this process, we can see in the notes of the account, we have the ability to then link another account. So if they were double registered, they had 2 account numbers, we can then say, okay, well, all of the charges that we get on account 912, they need to be forwarded over to another account. And I can see in this note that the charges, any charges coming in on 912 should get forwarded to 913. Okay. So that is a process that you guys have set up based on your charge forwarding, not charge forwarding, your charge master parameters to allow that to happen. So that should reduce some of your charge rejections. You may see them now in Magic or in 6.0. You know, charge entry frozen, charges rejected. Now you got to go look them up on the right account. We have the option to automatically set that forwarding link. Okay. Another example that.
Hey Heather, I'm just gonna cut in briefly, folks. Yeah. Just a reminder to everyone: please mute your phone if you're not talking. The phones pick up ambient noises very well. Thank you.
Another area where we can set up additional rejections in the patient accounting application is when we're looking at the requirements of the data. So you can see here, this patient came over. So for their occupational therapy charges, you know, we have the current status information. Okay. But I think for the speech therapy, we were missing them. Okay, and we can make those reject. Okay, it looks to me like that rejection was set up after the fact. I was actually looking at that charge code, and that was set on the same day that the charge was come over. Okay, I'm going to show you guys now where we set that up. Okay, in the charge master. Actually just pull that particular charge. So we actually can set in the charge master the transaction detail. If information has come over, if a charge has come over missing the required information, in that particular case, this is a therapy G code, we can make them reject. Okay. Now I think you can see this was just edited right before the charge went on. I was looking at that before the call. So if that was missing in the future, then that charge should reject when it came over from ITS. Okay. So we can set when we have those types of requirements, if we have professional charges that need performing doctors, we have drugs that need NDC information, therapies that need the G code information. If that information comes over from the clinical application, we can make it reject by setting this radio button. Okay. Then we would see on our process rejection screen, our rejection reason would be transaction detail information missing. And then we would be able to go in and edit that information before the charge posted to the account. All right. Correcting, posted. Okay. Now, obviously, with dictionary-based errors, your best bet is, of course, to make sure, you find them, you update your drug dictionary, your test dictionary, your exam dictionary, the procedure dictionary, whatever it is, so that things are not sent over. You're also providing a user education so that they're picking the right account, they're paying attention to the state of service, they're not, if they're doing documentation on a test that was done yesterday or last week, they're not just putting T in the date field and sending that charge over to billing. That's going to make more rejections that you'll need to monitor and fix. That will also slow down your revenue capture, will increase your late charges, all things that we don't want to have happen. So we want to make sure that these are not, that testing is done thoroughly, and these are not happening in your live environment. Okay. HCM, requirements, parameters, journal setting, service date description. Okay. All right. Okay. We do have on our agenda, just pull this up here a little bit, 2 documents talking about additionally your charge amount editable fields. Okay, it is Meditech's recommendation that the charge amount editable fields be set to no, with the exception of the materials application and the pharmacy application. Okay, as those applications do use markup formulas, our recommendation is to set the standard price to 0 and then allow materials and pharmacy to do the markup, cost plus markup formulas, and then patient accounting accepts that price. Okay. That's outlined in this charge editable document. Okay. And then also our processing charge rejections. Okay. It is our suggestion that each department be responsible for processing their own charge rejections. We do also understand and suggest that somebody, a point person from each facility, be assigned to monitor that, to make sure that the charges are being corrected promptly. And again, some sort of guideline, you know, charges have to be corrected the same day, definitely within 3 days, and that you don't have charges out there lingering on your rejection reports. Because like I said, that will cause lost revenue as well as late charges, which are much more laborious for the business offices to handle rather than when the charges are entered and billed promptly. Okay. So there are some illustrations of the workflow here. Okay. And that's it. Looks like I have reached the end of my agenda. So, questions to me before I hand it over, before I stop my share and hand this over to ITS?
Betsy, anything from your perspective or any comments you may make on things Heather has covered?
Nope, that was a basic, just to let everybody know from the hospital side, that was a basic overview from the billing perspective. We're going to go into talking to each Meditech person or hearing from each Meditech person in the other applications to see how that kind of works together hand in hand. So you got a nice overview from the billing perspective, and now we'll go into the other applications.
All righty. ITS, you want to grab it?
Sounds good. Let me just take it here. All right, can everyone see my screen now?
It says it's starting on my end. Has started screen sharing? Yeah.
Yeah, mine just says starting also.
But it doesn't show it yet.
Okay, give it a second. All right, does it still say starting for you?
Yeah, it does right now, Brian.
Yes.
Okay.
I think Brian might be rebooting.
Yes, it does appear that my Zoom client has crashed.
Ah, okay.
Sorry about that.
Do we want to, while you get that set up, do we want to skip to the next part of the agenda? Would that make sense, or? Brian, what do you think?
I think if lab can get started while I reboot this, we should be good.
Okay. Mark, can you take over for the moment?
I think so. Just give me a second. All right. I shared my screen. It's a Meditech start screen. Let me
Got
know
it.
if you guys can see it.
Yep.
Good.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Mark Fitzpatrick. So I'll be walking through kind of the lab perspective on charge reconciliation. So as Heather so thoroughly pointed out, the types of rejections you're likely to see in lab could be occurring for a few different reasons. Some of the more common ones at this stage could be because of an invalid charge code. So that could be a bill code that doesn't exist, that was sent from lab to bar. We also often see the service date error that she showed you earlier. So what I'm going to do is pick up from the charge rejection review process and then show you some ways that you might be able to use the lab system to help you figure out exactly what's going on with that rejection, which may help you with the process as a whole. So I'm going to head over to that desktop. And I think I'm in the Plymouth side, but these work just as well because so I head over to charge rejections, highlighting the lab charges, go to the process screen. So you see these AP patients, all the same patient for the most part. So these are the couple rejections we're seeing. So these ones in black are showing as a service date is before admission service date. Now in this particular case, this patient was registered on August 24th, but their work was performed on August 23rd. So that's why the service date being sent over to bar from lab is a little bit before the admission date or the service date of that requisition. So that's similar to what Heather's already showed you, so you could correct that or maybe review for possibly another account that the work should have been performed on. One of the interesting ones I'm looking at right here, and I'm curious if this was set up for the demo, if this is a legitimate issue, but this is a really good example that lab might need to troubleshoot given your unique billing scenario working within 3 different hospitals. So starting off, I can see this is an invalid charge code, amount missing. So the invalid charge code is what's drawing my eye, and that also in red here shows that. And that means that this bill code does not exist in bar. So that means lab sent something that is incorrect. So the first thing we need to figure out is where that came from on the lab side and figure out how to correct it. So as a one-off, if you're live, you could use the process rejection if you know what the bill code was, but you might not know what this directly correlates to. I mean, it doesn't exist in the charge master, so you can't reference that. So the best thing for us to do in lab is to go and find the order that it's attached to and see where it originally came from. So we can start with our account number there and head into the lab system, going over to our requisition desktop. And I chose the requisition desktop because it lets me review orders, but also lets me pull lab billing reports, which is going to be key for troubleshooting this particular issue. So looking at that account number, 3780. And their orders. So I can see they have one requisition, that's easy enough, 4479. Quite a few orders on here, so that bill code could be coming from any number of them. So starting with that rec, I'm instead going to switch over to our billing inquiry, put in that number, 4479, and this will give me that same list of orders, but also tell me the bill codes from each order. So this is the best place to find out where that bill code originated from. Expand this for you. So these are the billable parts of that test or that order. So I can see there's a CBC, a PT, a drug screen, a BMP, and then here are the bill codes. So that 721 code came off of my drug screen, so that's where I need to look at it. What's going on with that code? So right here on drug screen, I'm just going to quickly reference back to my requisitions to grab the mnemonic, because now I'm going to dive into the dictionaries, and I got to have the mnemonic to do that. It's going to be URDS, drug screen. So here's our test. There's our bill code, which is 12245. That doesn't match to what we saw in the billing inquiry. In this case, that's because there is a charge rule present. So the charge rule is where that bill code is probably ultimately being determined. So that means as a lab user, I need to go and check to see how that rule was written. And what this is saying is, if the patient is at the facility of BIDM, send over the 308 code. If they're a Plymouth patient, BIDP, send over the 721 code. So this is the code, and that's where it's originally coming from. So this could be something that's been put in place in lab with the intended functionality to link up with something that has not yet been built in bar, or maybe this was a simple transcription error that this is the wrong code. But as of right now, this code does not exist in the CDM. So either this rule needs to be updated but that would be the ultimate solution to this particular rejection. And then on the short term, since you've already performed that work, going back to your bar batch desktop, if you already had the correct code, you would just grab that rejection, use the process, and input the correct code to be applied to the patient, assuming that code is now available in the CDM. So with lab, because you guys are using charge rules, you want to be aware that charge rules, unlike the bill code field and dictionary, doesn't do a value check on the values you choose to use. So this value here is not being compared against the charge master in the same way that if you put it in here, this tells me that this doesn't exist. So this would provide the same error if I put the bill code here. Again, if you were going to link it up later, that's fine to do, but this kind of lets me know, hey, you might have the wrong number. A rule doesn't provide that check because these rules can be written as free text and do a lot of different things. So it's something to be particularly careful about when setting up the CHG charge rules in lab, because I know you guys are using them on a few tests. But that, I thought, was a pretty good example of starting on the batch desktop, finding an example, and then bringing that through to completion in lab. Now, on the same hand, these other codes, which are valid codes, but just have the warning service date and time, what you could do there is check their billing date, which is here, the 23rd. And if I actually look at that order, something that's pretty easy to tell is here I can see in lab what their admission date was. So these specimens were all collected on the 23rd, but this patient was registered on the 24th. Maybe it was pre-testing, maybe it's on collection date, maybe it's the wrong account. So then you just want to double check with the lab folks and see exactly what happened with this patient. How do we get this specimen before they were physically present? Did they come in for pre-testing and then get transferred over or something like that? And if it is okay, then you would just process to whichever the correct outcome is. So when you're looking at billing information and trying to track down some of that data, I would highly recommend using the billing inquiry. And it lets you can do this by patient. So if I knew the patient account number, which was AP3780, it's going to default in my rec. I could put in multiple recs. I could put in multiple patients. If I had, say, across different accounts, it's a 3790. I could put that in there too. This patient has multiple orders, so I can include all of them. This one's canceled. Maybe it's not that important. And pull it for the entire rejection list to see. That will tell me what these values here that we're seeing in bar, where they came from in lab by previewing this report. So these values here are what we sent to bar, and here are the tests that they came from. All right. Any questions for lab? All right. I'll pass it off. Brian, were you able to reconnect with Zoom, or we can go to pharmacy?
Yeah, so Brian wasn't actually able to get it up and running again, so this is Bjorn from ITS as well. I'm just hopping on quickly. I'm going to do the ITS portion. I got it up now and able to go.
All right. I've stopped sharing, so it should be available for you.
All right, excellent. Hi, everyone. I'm Bjorn. I'm covering for Patrick for this. So I'm going to be showing you the ITS portion of the billing workflow. So basically, for charge capture in ITS, it's going to be pretty straightforward. End users are pretty much not going to be doing anything really special or anything out of the ordinary. One of the things I do want to mention is that when they do log on, they are going to be asked for the appropriate site to log in. If you do have multiple billing sites, so if you have different revenue sites performing locations, it is very important for the technologist to be selecting the correct one. Otherwise, the charges might be routed to the incorrect location. So that's the importance of selecting our site. When I go to place an order, though, it's going to be using the site that we're already logged into. And for ambulatory orders, those would be assigned a site when they're being pulled off the hold queue if you're using Meditech Ambulatory. I'm going to be placing this order at a logged status, which is just going to be placing an order typically. So this lets people know that this procedure needs to be performed. While it's at a logged status, it's not actually going to be charging anything. So at this point, nothing has actually been sent to bar yet. All right, so now that I've placed my exam, I'm going to go into record that exam. When I record an exam, we're going to be moving that to a taken status, and that taken status is going to be what actually triggers this exam to be going to the billing module. That can be set to different statuses. However, we typically see the status for it to be sent to bar set to taken, because that's once the exam has been performed. Once the exam has been performed, then we can charge for it. So I'm moving this to taken, and I'm saving. Oops, and I'm going to be saving this. Once I move it to taken, you're going to notice that this charge credit routine on the right-hand side becomes available. When an exam is at a logged status, because we have not sent any charges out, the charge credit routine is not going to be available. So once we've sent those charges, it's going to become available for selection. And this is where we can go to charge or credit for an exam. So when I go to the charge credit routine, I can select how many I want to credit. Select that yes, I do want to credit it. And you're going to notice that the new totals are going to be 0, 0. And once I save this, I selected the wrong one here. Let me just select that again. You're going to notice that the charge amount is gone here. There is no charge amount for the procedure. If you're allowing technologists to be crediting for exams, this is where you would give them access to. You would need to make sure they have access to that charge credit routine. And you would need to make sure that they are aware of how to credit exams. Now, if they're not going to be the ones crediting it, it could be done through the billing side. Are there any questions about kind of what the end users would be doing for billing before I go into some kind of routines that we have and some sort of reports that we usually run? All right, well then let's move on to some of our, oh, sorry.
Excuse me, this is Karen from Needham. Could you show how, like, physical therapy or a clinic would enter a charge?
So physical therapies would be dropping charges if they're going to be using the ITS module for therapy charging. They would be going in through the therapist desktop. And I'm sorry, I'm not as familiar with what your workflow is. Are you planning on using ITS for therapy charges, or are you planning on using PCS for therapy charges?
ITS.
Okay, so when you're going in and you're dropping ITS physical therapy charges, you could go to this new order routine, which unlike on that tech desktop, this is going to be opening up a little box that gives you 3 options. The first option is going to be patient order, so I'm actually going to go right to left. And the patient order screen here is the exact same as what we just saw. So it's going to be the exact same thing, placing an order just like we saw. However, the patient charges screen is going to open us into a new routine where we can drop multiple charges on a single patient. And finally, we have the batch charges routine, which is where you can drop multiple charges on multiple different patients. So for the purposes of this then, I'm going to briefly go in and do the patient charges routine. So I'm going to be dropping, because I am in the imaging, actually, I can change the department. So let's see, physical therapy, you said. I don't see PT here. Has it been?
It'll be rehab.
Oh, you got it under rehab. Okay. Thank you. So let's go to new order, patient charges, PT, defaulting in today. So let's say I'm at the end of the day, or I've just finished up with the patient. I'm going to be pulling in my patient. I'm going to pull in my my ordering doctor. Whether we're going to ask for a performing provider or not. If we say yes here, it will then open up our option to have a default performing provider, who's our default technologist, and our default time. So maybe the patient came in at 1 o'clock, so our default time is going to be 1 o'clock. So what procedures did we perform? What charges are we dropping on this patient? So let's say we did 15 minutes gait training, body current status, maybe we did some aquatic therapy. It's going to be defaulting in our information that we put up. And then the time is also going to default in when I enter through here. You can add materials if there are any associated materials, and you can go to the charges screen if there are any charges that are needed to be added through the screen. Once I save this, let's go find our patient. You're going to notice that these 3 have been dropped immediately at a completed status, which means that those charges have been sent to BAR, and we have completed the charging portion from the ITS side. Just like on the other routine, though, you saw that we can charge credit. We can charge credit here as well. So are there any questions then from that perspective?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm from cardiovascular in Plymouth, and how will that workflow work with we currently doing charges through McKesson Cardiology?
Mm-hmm.
So will that flow? Is this going to talk to that, or how are we doing additional charges in Meditech?
So that depends kind of on how your setup is. So unfortunately, as I mentioned, I'm not as familiar with exactly how Beth is here because I am kind of stepping in last minute.
Okay.
But it depends on how you have it set up. It's possible that it could be continuing that way, but it's also possible that they may need to drop charges through ITS depending on how the setup is.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
This is all right. I think we're going to keep it the same as we have it now.
Okay.
I believe. Yeah.
And then so we'll just do charge reconciliation, confirming it's in BAR as we are.
Yeah, we'll have to look at the reconciliation process to make sure that what you have in McKesson gets over there, but I think that maybe is a little outside the scope of this demo, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, we'll have more like on-site department type meetings with you.
Okay. Great, thank you.
All right, any other questions from the end user perspective? Otherwise, I do have a few reports and routines that I want to show you.
I just wanted to bring up one quick thing. That was a question that came to me during your demonstration. That was for an outpatient scenario. I believe that, and correct me if I'm wrong, my fellow clinical directors on the call, that PCS will be how the inpatient therapy charges will cross, or am I incorrect on that? Because that was an outpatient example versus inpatient. Barbara? Or
yeah, I showed you the outpatient side. I don't.
Yeah, we were showing from the outpatient side.
But Betsy, what's your question? Are they doing inpatient?
Yeah, the inpatient side will come through the documentation, correct?
No, it'll come through ITS.
Okay, that answers your question. That was for Milton. Somebody else?
I mean, there are a couple of inpatient areas that will be using PCS. Rehab is not one of them for our go live. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right. If there are no other questions, I'm going to go over some of the routines and some of the reports and lists that we have. So one of the first things I want to show you is the billing report. And this billing report can be run for different date ranges. And what this is going to do is this is going to show us all charges that we have sent to BAR for this date range. So if I do the past week, we can restrict it to specific sites, or we cannot restrict it to specific sites. We can also do it by category. So when I run this report, it's going to show me this is what we have sent to BAR. So you'll see that in the category PT, department rehab, for this billing date, we've done these 2 procedures. And keep in mind that this is just information that has been sent to BAR. This doesn't mean that BAR has properly processed them. This doesn't mean that these charges have actually been filed and actually been sent to the patient. That report is just showing this is what we gave to BAR. Whether or not it rejects from the BAR side, whatever happens after we send it to BAR would need to be checked from the BAR side. But this is a good way to determine, are we sending the correct charges to BAR? Are we sending everything that we would expect to be sending? Which brings me to my next question, and you may have answered this before I jumped on, but who's going to be in charge of processing charge rejections? Is it going to be the departments that are in charge of processing rejections, or is it going to be someone in billing?
It will be departments.
Okay. So in that case, this is a useful tool to run, and then you can use that and kind of use that to kind of match up against the charge rejection list that you might see in BAR. And if the charge rejection list has something listed, we can check our billing list to see what we have sent when we sent it, and we can kind of compare that to what BAR has. One other useful routine here, or sorry, one other useful list here is the billing site discrepancy list. And basically what this is going to do is this is going to run a list for specific date range and specific categories that lets us know which orders were placed at one location. So if it was placed at site A, but moved to taken or its bill on status at site B, it would show up on this list. So let's see if we have anything here. We might not, we might. Okay, we don't have anything here. What it would do though, is it would show you what location the exam was placed at. So maybe it was placed at hospital A, but it might have been accidentally moved to taken at hospital B. And that's useful for us to determine using this list, because if something is moved to taken at hospital B, even though it was supposed to be done at hospital A, hospital B is going to be getting that revenue based on the revenue setups. So it is very important for us to monitor the billing site discrepancy list and to make sure that users are logging on to the correct site. All right. So are there any questions about billing from ITS's perspective? Anything from an end user, or anything for kind of charge rejection, charge management, or any billing ITS questions?
I have a question. It's echoing.
Yeah, sorry, I'm hearing a big echo.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
All right, yeah, sorry, I can't really hear you very well.
Whoever that is going to have to put on mute. We cannot, I mean, it's you're going to have to, can somebody email Betsy O'Brien the question, or someone else the question, we'll ask it for you.
Yeah, sorry, I was unable to hear pretty much anything from there. Do you actually just, so for that question, would you want to send an email to either myself, Brian, or Patrick, and we can kind of review it then?
They can send it to Betsy O'Brien, since I'm coordinating this with Meditech. So it can come to Betsy
Okay.
O'Brien, and I'll get it to Eric, and I will get it to the right people.
All right, sounds good. Are there any other questions though before I pass this off to the pharmacy? All right, so sorry, who was on for pharmacy? Was it Mike?
Yes, it is.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and you should be able to take control now. And I'm actually going to be dropping off now to get on another call. So if the question does come up, definitely feel free to reach out to us, though.
Mike, are you there? We're not hearing you at all, Mike.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can.
Okay. Sorry, I have my Zoom muted and all as well as my phone, just to be sure. All right, so hi, I'm Mike. I'm one of the pharmacy specialists on the account. Kind of before we go into what the medications look like with charges as they come over from OM, and kind of how we would process some of those as they come through. I'm just going to go through a few of the different dictionaries that kind of play into that. So in terms of how you're billing, right, we have our different options of either bill on administration and bill on dispense. Currently, you guys are set up for a fill bill, which is bill on dispense. If you were to change it to bill on admin, then we can restrict that by location. So that's just something to keep in mind. That is a toolbox parameter that Meditech does control. So you'd have to reach out to me, Jackie, or whoever from the pharmacy team would reach out to me and change that when it came for that time. So I just kind of want to put that out there to keep that in the back of your mind. In terms of how we set up drugs to have charges on them, we actually do it all in the drug dictionary. And what we do first, before we do that, is we build out, as Heather mentioned a little earlier, we build out the different pricing structures for different drugs. So those are our charge formulas. So these charge formulas live here. I know that they're already built out at this time. You guys have indicated, obviously, who's Milton, who's Needham, and so forth. And then within the actual charge formula itself lives these tables. So you have your drugs from this price to this price with a flat rate of this. Then you have anything from above 90 cents has a certain percent markup. So that's kind of how the prices are generated and the percents are actually handled. Now I know that algorithm's kind of already been settled out internally, so I'm just going to move on to our charge types. So what our charge types actually serve as, those connect the charges to the actual drug. So we can't directly connect a charge formula to a drug. We actually have to do that by charge type. So we build out our actual charge formulas like you saw, attach that charge formula, which looks up to that dictionary, to the charge type. And from here, charge type actually goes to our drug dictionary. Now, these will all be set up ahead of time, so come go live when, you know, your medications from your order sets are ordered and the appropriate strings are chosen and so forth. The medications themselves are what house your actual charge type information. So again, those will always come over with the default. So now here are those Milton IV inpatient, outpatient, and discharge charge types. Again, those look to the charge formula dictionary, which then apply that algorithm that was built. And again, these are set up as we go through. So as charges come through as, you know, incomplete, you know that something is not right in terms of what's been attached for our charge types. Something else too to mention, so just on a basic item, so let's go to, so we'll just have a drug here, 1,000 ml bag is fine. Our unit dose pack, it's either yes or no. So effectively what we're saying here is if it's set to yes, I want to charge the patient for the entire amount. If I have this set to no, then I'm only charging them what's for used or what has been used. So this will play into effect with certain items for waste. And that's another discussion, but that's just kind of a caveat to put out there as well, that depending on how this is flagged for multi-dose or single-dose vials, wastage amounts will be affected. All right, something else to note too is our billing unit of measure and multiplier also will have some effect in waste. What this essentially is state by state, it varies on what they need to charge per drug in terms of how much actually is going to be changed pending what insurance could be. So the actual unit of measure, it should reflect the value defined by the dispense form on this page 1 here. So if I need to create some sort of adjustment on this drug for, again, Medicaid purposes, you would want to make sure it represents your dispense form. Now, in our customer-defined parameters, so our global settings, we have which we've already set up. We did this one of our trainings. Our default billing unit of measure and multiplier. So effectively, what this is saying is all drugs, if this is set to Y, all medications will apply a default of unit for unit of measure, and 1 is the multiplier. So effectively what I'm saying is I'm getting 1 unit of this item. Now, if you put anything in here that could be different from that default that we already have set, then it would take that. And again, that could change depending on what the actual item is and depending on what the reimbursement may need to be or waste amount may need to be, excuse me. But if that doesn't need to be applied to a drug, then again, this default of billing unit of measure and multiplier will be taken. And in terms of how our pricing is based and where it lives, right now, that's our master, so we come here. This is where it would actually live in terms of what the price would be. Now, obviously, nothing's here. We're still in build phase. But this, again, when we do our FDV, our monthly FSV loads, the information then is populated into our, our wholesale acquisition costs, or RAWP. And then we have manual fields where you can enter your cost if necessary. So again, I just kind of want to put that out there in terms of where that information is coming from or where it's loaded into. So now let me hop into the desktop here. So this is rarely, now a medication's been placed in OM, comes over to pharmacy for verification. So it comes through, we go to the patient profile. Now on our patient profile here, we have the ability to, first, I guess I'll show you this RX audit, right? And if there were billing information on it, it would have its own separate field here. Now it's showing you different interaction history. It's showing you your full history down here. Now nothing's been actually charged on this, so there's no box for it. However, if you, let's say a medication was dispensed, one was actually given, so you have your total dose, it wasn't documented that it was given, so it wasn't charged on, so there would be no billing. But you could expand that billing and you could see what the fine detail of that actually would be. Another thing too, so we have, in terms of processing them, the good thing about charges rejecting and not crossing over to pharmacy from OM is when they come over, they'll come over as incomplete. So the status would actually say incomplete. So we have these different statuses. If we didn't have one of those charge types that you saw earlier attached to the actual drug itself, then it would come through as incomplete. And how you would fix that is you'd go in and you'd look and see what actually was missing. I'm going to come and I'm just going to edit my order. Now down here, you notice it's defaulting in that charge type that we saw a few minutes ago. So if this were blank, which would be the case of an incomplete drug, what you would do is you'd come in, you'd look, you'd select what you'd want for the actual item, and then you could save and you could continue forward. So again, that's kind of the nice thing in terms of the rejections. You see them right away in your status. You can go into the audit and you can see why it rejected and then what you need to do to fix it. Now, there could be other reasons for rejection, but 95% of the time it's because it's missing a charge type. And again, that's an easy fix. And then once you make your edit here in your workflow, then you go to the dictionary and you just attach what's necessary. And that's common too. Sometimes they're just missed in the process of the build. Another thing too is in terms of processing a charge, if you need to debit or credit a specific item on a profile, you come to the profile and we come to our debit and credit button, right? So we have an order eligible for credit and order eligible for debit. So we want to credit, okay? Where is this coming from and what doses do we want to credit? We want to credit this 1,300 dose that was given. We can define the service date for that and the time for that. Save this. File, yes, and then you're kind of off there. So now let's see that I've credited. Let's see if it shows me some RX. So now that I've done that credit, it shows me what the initial order was, what happened as it came through, and so forth. And again, that's going to be for all medications and I'm sure you've seen it as you test and have been moving through the system. You also over here too, just one more billing item. You have this patient summary too, so you have your summary of all charges. Okay, and if you see a plus, there's some detail going on with this. You can go and see what that was. Then you can debit and credit almost in like a batch routine. So say we want to do today, and we say we want to do this at 1342. Increment bag numbers, if you were crediting or debiting multiple IV bags, if you do increment bag numbers, it's going to credit or debit each bag you have. So if you have 2,000 ml bags that make up an order, you have increment bag numbers, yes. This would then credit or debit those applicably, or respectively, excuse me. So now, I'm going to pull in a patient, Allison, and it's going to ask me now what I want to actually go ahead and credit or debit. So what items I actually would want. So if I want to credit, just kind of how you, do this here. 113. So a plus is going to be an actual debit, and a minus would be an actual credit. Service date and time, today, now. And now you can move on. Now you can do it for this. The difference between here and the front page is you can pull in directly by RX number A, or B, you can pull in different test patients. The other one, or just patients in general. So if you had multiple RXs that you needed to do a debit or credit on, this is a batch routine for multiple patients at a time. So again, if you didn't want to just do it on one, you could come here and you could do it that way. Just kind of a quicker for workflow. And again, you can do, you have your summary, you can do this by credit or debit by location. Dispense return, this is just, it's the same functionality as a debit or credit, you're just not charging. Which I don't know what too much use you'd have of that. And then a price quote routine. All right, any questions on any of that? I know that the pharmacy team has probably been doing a lot of this. We've definitely done this before, but if there aren't, I guess a couple reports that are beneficial. The billing log. So this is exactly what BAR is going to be actually seeing. So this is exact billing information that's sent to BAR. So your NDC, your quantity, your billing unit of measure on this particular account. So I can just run one real quick so you can get an idea. Yes, we'll do and today from Milton we'll do it to Plymouth. And I'm not restricting. 12. All right, and now what you're seeing is on a particular patient account, quantity, amount, the actual billing number on that, NDC, what the drug was, and so forth. So again, it gives you a good representation of what the location is, time, that you ran it, and what was actually sent or not sent over to BAR. That's probably the big one that you'll be using more than others. Are there any questions on any of that? All right, if not, then it's going to surgery. Do you have surgery on the line? If so, you can take it. I stopped sharing my screen.
AJ, are you on?
I don't think he is on. All right, well, maybe when he comes back on, maybe he's having some WebEx issues. Materials management's next, if they're ready.
Okay.
We'll be after him, if that makes more sense. I don't know. It's up to you, Eric.
No, that's fine. I just want to, I don't know if he's.
Should I get started with materials management?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead with materials and I'll circle back with AJ.
Okay, let me just share my screen. Can everyone see my screen here?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm going to go through the patient issues routines and how we can set up everything on the materials side so that the charges are sent over to BAR. The first thing that I'm going to cover is the inventory dictionary. So when you are building dictionaries or editing inventories in the inventory dictionary, in order to have patient issues recorded, you need to flag this to yes, patient issues recorded. If you are going, you can also select yes to record the timestamp, the service time for patient issues out of this inventory. And if you are going to use patient charge markups, yes or no. So the system will include item cost markups in the charge batch when it's sent over to BAR. In the GL tab, we also have the patient charge department. So in the inventory dictionary, this charge department for patient issues will be used to create a GL account from this inventory. And we also have the default expense object code here and the default patient issues expense object code. All right, now I'm going to go into the item in stock processing desktop, which is essentially the item in stock dictionaries. I'm going to pull in a stock number here as an example. So I pulled in the sub-inventory and the stock number here, and under the stock issues tab, under patient issues, this is where you can enter in the unit of issue for patient issues, the expense object, the expense code for the stock item, and this is where you can enter in the charge code. So this will look up to the BAR charge master, and you can associate that charge code with this item. Next is the category dictionary.
Hey, Brian, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
This is Tim Cummings. Can we also put that charge code in the item dictionary and have it flow through to the stocks?
What was that, the procedure code?
The procedure code, yes.
So that's attached to the stock item, in the stock dictionary. Let me just go into the item in stock processing desktop here and see. So no, the procedure,
right
the
there,
procedure code
is right there. See the charge code? There you go.
Yeah, the charge code. Sometimes it's sometimes the same things have different wording in Meditech. Yeah, you can associate it here. Also, I'm going to show the category dictionary next, and then I'm going to come back into the item in stock processing desktop.
And by the way, the only integration we're doing patient charging for supplies on is through the surgery module.
Okay. So every item does need to be attached to a category, and that category dictionary lives in materials management. So any items that are associated with a particular category, you can come into this dictionary and enter in the markup percentages for chargeable items here, and as well as an effective date, so that this will be the default for any items that are attached to this category. You can enter in the markup percentage here from items that cost a certain amount, and this dollar amount would be on top of the percentage that you enter in here. And now I'm going back into the item and stock processing desktop. You can also enter in a markup percentage for a particular item here, and that will override the category dictionary. So this is attached to this category. The markup percentage that you enter here for this item is going to override the category markup percentages for that category. Are there any other questions before I move into the patient issue routine? Okay, I'll take that as a no. So I'm going to go into the requisitioning desktop now. And this is where you can do the patient issues routine. And just over to the right here, patient issues. You'll enter in the inventory that you're issuing out of. Then at the bottom, I'm going to create a new record. So this is the record date that you're creating the record, and patient detail. You need to enter yes here in order to send the patient details over to BAR, the MIS patient facility. Now we can select it and enter the stock items that we're issuing to a patient. You can look up to the patient account number here by typing in the first letter, and then you can do an F9 lookup. And this would be the service date that they received the item. And here we can enter in the stock number that we're issuing, as well as the quantity. And you can hit save, and the system will prompt you to enter in the next patient account number. When you're done, you can hit cancel.
Okay, why don't you transfer them to me? Thanks. Hi, Cath Lab.
Hi, Cath Lab. Could you mute the meeting phone on this?
Hello, Cath Lab. Hi, I understand you're trying to get in touch with the secretary. How can I help you? Yep, that's speaking. What type of appointment would you like, sir?
Is there any way MediTech can mute that person's line?
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Okay, thanks, Eric. I appreciate it.
Okay, of your neck, of your legs?
Oh, this is such a HIPAA violation.
Kidney. Okay. What doctor is it?
Trying to see which one is
Can I
talking.
have your first and last name, please?
It's Christina.
And your birthday, sir? Okay. Hold on one second. I'm going to go see.
There's a few people on, so it's taking me to find if she didn't dial in with her name, I can't.
I think it's a TCS user.
I think there is a Christina in here, but she's muted.
Want to proceed for right now?
Yeah, and basically the last step here is once you're done entering in your patient issue records, then you can go ahead and post it to the system, and that is going to send it over to BAR.
Brian, quick question. I noticed you're demoing out of 615. Is there a reason for that?
The only reason I'm demoing out of this particular one is because our 615 ring, or our newer ring, doesn't have any items. It doesn't have examples of items to use, and at least not that I know of at this time. I'm using this ring because I know that we have items built in here and that we have expense object codes associated with items that would allow me to actually.
Okay, all right. I got your point. Can you try to speak to some of the differences that may exist in 616, or I don't know if you can possibly launch a screen to at least show what things might look different, though. But I'm just concerned that there's potential workflow differences.
They're pretty much exactly the same. The look of it is a little bit different. Because there isn't anything built in here, I'm not going to be able to.
The secretary is just on the other line scheduling another test for someone else. Can I have a
go
number?
through a process of patient issue.
Right back. Yep. Yes. Okay. We have your paperwork though, and she'll give you a call today.
All right. I think I've muted her now.
Yeah, I don't think any of the newer rings are going to work.
Okay, well, proceed as best you can at the moment, but we may have to do some follow-up with regards to changes between 615 and 616, okay?
Okay, that was basically everything that I had to cover for materials.
Betsy, do you have any questions in particular?
No, I was just wondering why we weren't in our 616 test system, but if it's the same, then that's okay. I just see Ohio Valley and just was curious about why we weren't in BIH like we were for the other.
Yeah, like you said, more so kind of examples that he could show to speak to. But
well, it's also because I'm covering this call for someone else, so
understood.
I don't have access
Brian.
to your ring.
So no, understood for right now. But we'll Betsy and folks from MM, if there are further questions, please let us know, and we'll be happy to follow up.
This is Tim from MM. I'm good.
Okay. All right. I do believe that. So, were there any other points that you had, Brian, or are we ready to turn it over to the next application?
No, we're ready to move on at this time.
Okay. Thank you. AJ, I believe you're with us, right?
Yep. Sorry, I'm back now.
All right. So we will turn things over to surgery then.
All right. Sounds good. Can everyone see my screen and can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, perfect. All right, so hi everyone, this is AJ. I'm going to be going over how we generate charges on the surgery side as well as our charge reconciliation process. I'm going to be starting off this demonstration on surgery. I've already gone ahead and booked a case on the scheduler desktop, so we have a case already there. And I can access the charting, aka our charges, through any one of our desktops. So the scheduler desktop, the Sur Tracker, or the biller desktop in order to launch into the patient's record. For today's purposes, I'm going to be in the biller desktop primarily, just because this is the desktop that someone in each one of the surgical areas or each one of the facilities should be responsible for maintaining. The users on this desktop are going to be reviewing all of the charges that have been generated from our one-time record documentation. We do not have in surgery the ability to generate charges or capture charges through assessments or interventions, but things like item-based charging, implant-based charging, time charge rules, procedure-based charging, and other miscellaneous charges as well, like invasive procedures. Let's see. And I'm trying to think if there's any other ones. You can even see as I launch into the biller desktop on this right-hand side, we have a list of all of the various types of charges that we can capture, and I believe that's all of them. So our time charge rules will include preoperative time, intraop time, phase 1, and phase 2. Now, specific for Beth Israel, your preoperative phase of care is not currently being utilized. You are utilizing our holding room record section for pre-op in terms of the day of surgery, prepping the patient. But after our evaluation, there is no charging that you guys do for preoperative time. So the fact that you're going to be documenting in the holding room record is fine. You're not going to have any time charge rules based off of that. But you do have time charge rules for the intraop and phase 1 levels of care, phases of care, as well as anesthesia-based time charges. So currently on this desktop, you can see I have my one patient case that I've scheduled for today, and I have some documentation that had started already. So I had completed out the holding room record, and I hadn't started any of the intraop or phase 1, phase 2 record. This is going to be based off of circulators and phase 1 and phase 2 nursing documentation. So in purposes of this demo, let's go into the documentation. So we're going to go into the intraop record, and then once again into the one-time record at the top, denoted by the intraop record section. It'll say phase 1 for the other phases of care. I'm going to quickly document all of my normals, so just choosing that N icon, I can see that the anesthesia type is defaulted in as general, but we are going to, or Beth Israel has decided to base their anesthesia time, I should say anesthesia charges based off of the times. So you can see listed elsewhere in the record is our anesthesia start and anesthesia end times. So I'm really just going to be documenting the fields that'll be generating charges. So I know I'm going to skip around a little bit, but since this is the charge reconciliation webinar, I'm just going to talk about the charges. So I'm going to put in some times, putting in a little bit of earlier times just because I can't document future times. So I'm going to go ahead and put in anesthesia end. Let's do 1 hour. Don't need a procedure end and an out of room an hour later as well. So we have a 12:32 start and a 1:32 end for both our interim and anesthesia times. I'm just going to quick save what I've done so far. The system's just letting me know a required field of wound class, so I'm going to quick save that as well. Okay. And I'm going to also just collapse this really quick just so I can see the full record. So far all I've done is document a couple times. So I have my anesthesia start, anesthesia end, anesthesia type. I also have interim, out of room. Next, we have a section called items and implants. So through the documentation of any items or implants on the case, I'm going to do a drop down, choose my preference card as a shortcut. I have a list of all the items that are coming in from the preference card. I'll hit OK. And then you can see here, we have all of those default in. One thing that the surgery team should be mindful of is that they do want to go through the item list and set up the preference card defaults. So some of these are coming in blank. That's an issue. We want to go ahead and go into the preference card dictionary and define these as the default yes. As I go through this list, I want to point out that all of these charge use fields are coming across as no. And the reason for that is because in the item dictionary for these various items, there is no billing code associated. So that's why the charges are all changing to no. If we want to capture charges for any of these items, the fix has to come from the dictionary level, which means that at the item level, whether it's an integrated item from materials management, the billing code should be associated at the stock level or at the item level in materials management, which was just demonstrated prior to me. Or if it's a miscellaneous item or a item that's not integrated with materials, then it should be done on the surgery side. I'm just going to pick a couple of our implants. Hopefully some of these implants might have a charge on them. It doesn't look like they do. Let's take a look at this OR sub. No, this one doesn't either. So one area that may need some review is those billing codes for your items. They would automatically drop charges. The circulators in the room would be able to see that. There's no way to suppress the billing information from appearing. It appears as a view only unless the charge is marked as charge editable. So something like a miscellaneous implant or miscellaneous item would likely have a $0 charge editable billing code associated to it. So that way the biller, once they are actually at the point of reviewing the charges that have been generated, hopefully point out or see any of those $0 amounts and rectify it there. So go through a process of contacting materials or contacting the finance team and either building appropriate charge code or just using the miscellaneous and verifying or closing the case at that point. That's a workflow that does need to be decided upon. Most sites do go down the route of building out a billing code, and once ready, then they'll close out the case and by associating that billing code to the appropriate item. Looks like everything else is good. I don't have any other fields that can be driving charges in your introp one-time record. Keep in mind that we do have another field that could be added called invasive procedures. Invasive procedures are anything that is done during a case when any phase of care, pre-op or phase 2, that breaks the skin of the patient but doesn't really consider itself or is not qualified to be a full surgery. So central line placement or IVs that are administered, blocks, anything like that. Those also have the ability to drive charges. I believe Beth Israel went through a decision-making process of, since invasive procedures do not flow to PCS or EDM, they're not documented like queries, they're fields in our one-time record, where you are not going to pursue that route, you are going to be documenting it via intervention or assessments, and then if there are any charges that need to be incorporated for placement of those types of procedures, they can be captured either through an items section, so a none-type integrated item, so nothing in materials will be depleted, or through this additional charges section, which can be found in each phase of care as well. So if we needed to, we can always go to additional charges, which will be accessible either through the documentation or through the biller desktop if the biller needs to associate it. So I don't have a very good example of, let's do mesh. Let's do this one. So I'm not sure, okay, so it doesn't look like this one had any amount associated to it, but you can see that simply by selecting a billing code, you do have the option of just adding a miscellaneous charge. So I'm gonna go ahead and pick other one. Nope, doesn't look like the billing information is really in here. Yeah, so I'm gonna cancel out just because it's not really dropping a charge. All the charge amounts are 0. But it's pretty straightforward. If you go to additional charges, if there is an event that happens outside the norm, or if this is the route that you would go for those invasive procedures, then you can attach any additional charges to the record right from there. All right, so I've gone in and documented just a few fields. If I go and return back to the biller desktop, you can see some of these preliminary charges have started to appear. We do have introp time charges dropping in, as well as anesthesia-based time charges. Those are based off those times I've documented, but there are quite a few other fields. So if those supply charges did have billing codes, I would see this section start to fill out, as well as implant amounts down here. New functionality in 6.1 Surgical Services allows us for the ability to document items in phase 1. So let's go over to the phase 1 record section, and then we'll document the area. So there is a task out here for that area field lookup. It's currently looking to the previous field that was documented. So we do have a task tracking that little issue right there, but let's go ahead and put in some times for recovery. Put in 13, 1439, and then it doesn't look like you have the items field included in your phase 1 record section. You're not documenting any items there, but that is also another way of capturing any of your charges. So just by documentation of the area, the station, and some times, I'll hit save. And we now have phase 1 recovery time coming in. So 1 hour of PACU equates to about $1,000 of charges, patient charges. Keeping in mind that this is all preliminary, which means that all of these charges are being generated on the surgery side, but nothing has flown over or been sent to patient accounting just yet. That's normal and standard workflow. Usually the day after, or maybe even 2 days after, is when a biller would be going in and reviewing all of the charges that have been generated so far, and then making a decision as to what to do with those charges. Their role is to look at the documentation to make sure that nurses have signed off on that record. So at the bottom of each phase of care is a completed by and completed by user section that can be filled out, which changes this chart status. So we have 3 statuses: no activity, in progress, and complete. So the biller is going to be looking for complete status and then looking over to the charges. Does anyone have a question? Any questions up until this point? No? Okay. So the key word here is preliminary charges. As I mentioned, that these have not been sent over to patient accounting just yet, so we have $8,000 worth of charges. The nurse can go into, the biller can go into review charges on the right-hand side and get a breakdown of what all of those preliminary charges just are, so they still say preliminary. I only documented 1 hour of intra-op time, so it literally comes in with just the first hour. If I had documented 1 additional minute, I'd be willing to bet that it would be OR first hour, and then another line would appear below saying something like OR next 15 minutes or next 30 minutes, something like that. And not only would we get a $6,800 charge, but we might get another $200, $300, $400, just as an idea of additional time, time-based charges. Phase 1, same principle. I only documented 60 minutes, so therefore I get that $1,029 charge. And anesthesia, same thing, so $141. If I go back in and add more time, just change my out of anesthesia end or out of room times or something like that, then I should see additional charges automatically drop. Okay, so let's say that the nurse, that the biller has gone in and reviewed all of the documentation, reviewed all the charges, and everything is correct. So now their workflow is determining what to do with these $8,000 worth of charges. If all the documentation and charging is complete and the case has occurred, so the procedure itself was complete, then what they would do is go to this closed case routine. Closed case means that no more edits can be made to the record, and that the charges will go in real time to patient accounting to their batch desktop. If all the other criteria is the same, no more documentation can take place, no more charging needs to be edited or any changes along those lines, but for whatever reason the procedure did not complete. So as the timeout was being taken, you had all the surgical supply items opened and therefore are going to be charged to the patient, but it was determined or realized that the consent wasn't signed or there was an abnormal lab value or something along those lines. And you still want to charge the patient, but you don't want that procedure to count towards your stats and averages, you would then choose the option to defer the case. So deferring the case gives you the ability to send the charges that have been generated to BAR, or the user can then also say no, they don't want to send charges in the case that those charges were inaccurately generated, or the scenario is that we shouldn't be able to charge a patient because of the reason that the case was canceled. The user in that situation would not choose cancel case, because if documentation is started, then that user would want to probably keep that documentation. Any clinical documentation done on a chart should not really be canceled or removed, because that would eliminate it or remove it. So really close or deferring the case are the 2 options when documentation has started. So let's say I'm going to close out this case. After I choose it, I do get a little hard stop or warning message that can appear. So it looks like there were some additional times that were added as requirements before a case can be closed. So I should document the timeout call, procedure start, and procedure end times before continuing. That's a great little check that's been added to ensure that you are going to be capturing all of your case times or time charge rules, because I'd be willing to bet the inter-room and out-of-room times were also added to that list of requirements, which would help eliminate the generation of case documentation without those charges. So hopefully you're not going to be missing out on anything. So I'm just going to put in 1330. Let's do timeout was called 12:34. And the room was ready at 12. So just putting in some basic times, just following the progression. And then actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to extend some of these times out a little bit. So I'm going to make that 33. Sorry, I'm going to make this one 32. And going down here and making this 33, just so we get another minute and another charge, hopefully, drop in as well. There we go. So now I get $8,000 worth of charges from Interop, and if I go to review, then now I should see hopefully another line item, so each additional 15 minutes. And then if I did the same thing for PACU, I should get some more charges as well. So I'm going to go ahead and close the case. And this time I've gone in and filled out all my required fields. So I'm going to hit save. And what will happen now is that those now they're $9,000 worth of charges in real time is being sent to patient accounting. So whether it is a user on the surgery side or responsible user on the billing side, there needs to be some interface and communication between the two departments regarding this, this integration. So now we can go over to patient accounting and then our batch desktop. And then when we go to see our summary worth of charges, 1 second, let's refresh. We should see a little bit more than 9,000. I believe that was the earlier case, but it should compile in just a minute.
I have a question.
Yep.
If there are charges that still need to be entered, like you don't have a billing code for an implant or something that got brought in that day,
Correct.
do you just leave it open and it would have to be closed later after you get that billing code?
So that is a workflow that also needs to be determined, because there is an enhancement added in 6.1 that's different than 6.0, which allows you to close cases on the biller desktop and send the charges. Like, so let's say, even in this scenario, let's say we've closed the case, $9,900 worth of charges, and we're still waiting on an implant. So it was a miscellaneous implant brought in on the day of surgery, not built into the system, and now you're going through the workflow of building the appropriate code for that miscellaneous implant. Let's say 24 hours have passed and now you have the code. What you can do is reopen the case, and when you hit this reopen case button, that allows you to do more documentation, which means it allows you to add the charge that was missing to the implant. That reopening the case does not immediately send back all of the charges that have been generated like it did in 6.0. Now in 6.1, a time window appears. So we actually have a parameter that lists out how much time must pass before all of the charges that were sent to patient accounting come back to surgery. So I believe it's under the charts tab. Okay, so we have it set for Milton, Needham, and Plymouth to 1 hour, which is fine. It does not mean that you have 1 hour after you've closed the case to make the changes. It means 1 hour after you've hit the reopen case routine and then make your changes, add the implant charge, and when you reclose the case, let's say the new implant cost $1,000, then only an additional $1,000 will be sent to patient accounting, not $10,905. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, perfect. The other option, so let's say that you did want to return all $9,905, you would reopen the case and then wait 1 hour, and then all the charges would come back from this batch desktop. So now that we can see the additional about $10,000 worth of charges go over, we would see a credit all the way back to surgery. So it would be, I'm not sure which column it would be, but you would lose these charges listed here. All right, and as I mentioned, these charges did send in real time. I think you could see it. Originally it said 9,000 and now it says about 19,000. And you can see it listed below with all of the charge codes and where it's coming from, so the various account numbers and including the descriptions of what those charges are. So this is for the first hour and then the additional 15 minutes, the PACU time charges, the anesthesia time charges. We would also get a list of only the chargeable items. So any of those items that are documented, they did not flow to our biller desktop. Like, we didn't see it under review charges, even though I documented a whole bunch of item supplies. We don't see it on the bar side either. So any of those non-chargeables do not flow anywhere. It's only the chargeable items that flow, and they do so automatically as long as a billing code has been associated. But that is pretty much all that I had to demonstrate. We have our various ways of charge generation pretty much listed right here. And as I'm on the closed side, it no longer says preliminary charges, it just says regular charges, because that means that that has flown over to the patient accounting side. And in your system, it is flowing appropriately. There is a bar batch that's been set up for surgery. So all of that stuff is available to be seen over on the bar side, or patient accounting side. Does anyone have any questions for me or surgery or any workflows, surgical workflows they would like to be seen? No? Okay. So then I guess I can pass it off to the next specialist, which was supposed to be materials, but I think the next one's
It's
PCS.
actually PCS now. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. You can just stop sharing. And this is Jason Santos, by the way. I'll be taking over.
Okay. Thanks, Jason.
No problem. Okay. Screen. All right. So just confirm you guys can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so we're going to do just a little bit of a walkthrough through how we can generate some charges in PCS. We'll also demonstrate the reports, and we'll also take a look at the ED and some of its small differences. So the first one here is an inpatient, and I'm just going to do some basic documentation. I have just a basic billing set up right now. Basically, document on the intervention. It will drop a charge. There's some other type of charging you can do, which we'll review in the intervention dictionary, but this will at least get us the charge to our patient billing report. So I have just vital signs here. I have a basic charge on that. So I'm just going to do a little bit of documentation here, do a save, and then we'll go on to the ED side where I have that as well. So I'm just going to save some information because this is not specific to any response-based charging, quantities, or elapsed time. It would just drop a charge based on that. So I'm going to X out here and do an ED patient now. It is all through PCS. I could go to the tracker, but the ED chart is going to be the same. So you can see here some small ED differences since I opened an ED patient. Go to the work list, and I set this up on triage. So I'm going to go in, just do a small piece of documentation, and then this will have generated our charges for us. So I'm just going to go here. I think that's the only required field we need. And again, that would drop a charge. So let's just go ahead and look at that report and see what that would look like. Oops. So it's two different areas here. We have, oh, can everybody hear me? All right. So I'm just going to go to the billing report for ED first off, and I'm going to go by date. And the default here is registration date. I'm going to go by billing date since I only want things from today that we've done today and just now. So I'm going to make it today through today. I'll include all items and run it for no specific facilities. Run report. Let's do a quick preview. And I think we're just going to have our one patient. Yep. So you can see here one that I did earlier today, one that I did today. There's a charge associated to them. Don't worry about the dollar amount. They just plug in a bill code for demonstration purposes and in your in-house ring. And so you can see here that our charges are crossing over. I'm going to close this out and go to our PCS equivalent. It's basically the same report, but I'm going to show it anyway. So you could do it by patient, care provider, or just a general billing list. I'm just going to click billing list. And I'm going to make it today through today again. And I'll just make it all inclusive of everything, which is fine. I think we only have the one that I did earlier anyhow. There we go. So you can see here again, two charges, one that I did earlier and one that I did just now, and they're both coming over here, as you can see. Okay, so that's just the basic setup of how we can get, or documentation of how we can get information to go to BAR. I'm going to open the intervention dictionary now, and we'll take a look at the PCS and ED setup there. Okay, so here's our vital signs. I'm going to go to the billing tab. And there we go. Let's go down to Plymouth. We're just plugged in. So this is very straightforward. So all we're saying is that every care provider type, although we could make care provider specific, is going to generate this bill code. Each time I document on it, it will transfer over to BAR. There's some other different types of charging you can do. There's a professional bill code if you have outside care providers that are doing documentation. You could charge differently for them, and then there's also a query you would need to put on that doc section in order to basically flag those charges as being a professional bill code charge. So basically you could kind of allocate the funds to them however you're contracted with them. There's some other style charging as well that we don't have set up, but basically the same thing in regards to looking at the report from a high level. We have quantity charges, so we keep track of items used. So if you happen to use a particular item, you could charge for how many used, and that would be all tracked via a tracking query. So this would actually look to the doc section itself and say, okay, this is how many widgets we've used. Same similar concept for elapsed time. You could have a time query. It would be a query on the doc section, and then you could punch in how much time was used. And so let's say we're doing minutes, we could have an initial block of, let's say, 15 minutes, and we could charge X for 15 minutes, and then Y for every additional 5 minutes thereafter, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever you wanted to break it down into. And then we also, on a separate page here, could do response-based charging. So this is going to say if any query is documented in a particular fashion or a particular response was chosen, you could charge differently based on that response. So just as an example, even though you wouldn't charge this way, I'll open the temperature source and you can see all the responses. So you could actually charge differently depending on what was selected here. Not typically used all that often, but it's something you could use. I'm going to open the ED equivalent, and it's basically the exact same thing, but we'll open it up nevertheless. Oops, if I spelled triage correct. And go to ED and billing. And you can see here, it's basically the same setup. We're doing charge per documented occurrence, all well and good here. Have the quantity-based charging and the elapsed, they work in the exact same fashion. And then the billing page 2 is going to be for response-based charging. So effectively the same setup here. ED does have one additional billing methodology, and we'll demonstrate that next though. So close out the intervention dictionary, and we're going to go back to, actually let's close out test. Oh no, we can use the ED patient here, perfect. So I'm going to go to ED visit data. And on this area, there's a tab for billing. So this is an area where you can do basically care level charging. You could also have it triggered via acuity if you were to set that up. But you can see here, I have some just test examples earlier. So let's say our patient, this is non-acuity level. Let's say we determine them to be at a level, say 3. So they've accumulated enough care that we feel they're at a level 3 charge. So I select that. And then this item will go in as a debit, and it will file through to BAR and charge the patient accordingly. As you can see here, though, there is a credit item. So let's say that this was a mistake. I had actually put this through earlier for our care level 1 billing. I could go in, select a level 3. You can see the credit item does appear, and then I could click that and it would credit the transaction. So you can go back and forth and basically correct the charges if you happen to make a mistake. I could go in to view all transactions as well from ED, which is a nice convenient tool to see everything generated. And so we can see our manual care level options as well as our documented items here for the patient. So you can see them all listed out, and you get the full audit trail of everything regarding that. So you can see everything was done on my workstation, which user I was, the provider for the patient, the provider type, everything is listed out. The care level doesn't have that, of course, because it's not based on documentation. So some of the items like time and quantity doesn't exist. So one last thing I'll show in regards to billing. And let's go to Meditech staff actually. PCS. And toolbox parameters. ED has the equivalent, and I'll open that too, just so you guys can see. This is your in-house ring, so don't worry too much if you think these aren't your settings. You have your own system. This is just your in-house one. But for the business unit, you have the option to send your charges to BAR With the midnight run, if left blank, we could just X that out, but we also could send them every, let's say, this is for every minute, so I could send it every 60 minutes, and that would automatically generate compile times for me of every hour, and you can see them all right here, and you can set that up however you like, and it can also be different per business unit if you happen to have multiple ones. You can also be set up differently for ED. So if I go to the EDM toolbox parameters, this being a toolbox item would have to be set up by us at Meditech, but we could do it to whatever specification you wish. So I could go in and select Plymouth in this instance. Again, say, well, let's make it a little different. Actually, I'll make it something silly just to show that it does work for everyone. You could do it every minute, not recommended, but you could you could do that, and it will go on and on until 2359 in perpetuity. But those are the basics of the billing from the PCS side. It's relatively straightforward, I think. Are there any questions? All right. If there are no questions, I don't believe we have anybody else to pass this on to, so I'll give it back to Eric, I guess, to close this out. Yep,
that's fine. That sounds good. So, Betsy, while we still have everyone on the phone, we have folks on the phone, are there any questions, any points that you want to bring up in particular, talking about any of Beth Israel's plans with regards to charge reconciliation?
Sure. I can just close out the call for us. I just want to thank everyone for attending. Invitations will be sent for follow-up meetings at each facility. So we'll have facility-specific meetings that will be the follow-up on the workflow and process that will be taking place. So we appreciate your participation with this new endeavor, and we welcome everybody on the call to the new Meditech 6-1 Charge Reconciliation team. And have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you so much. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you all.
Thank you for your time. Have a very good day and a good weekend.